Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today, my guest is one of my favorite people, librarian and musicologist and musician, Gayle Green. Gayle Green holds degrees from Ashland College, University of Virginia, and Indiana University, with an emphasis in music librarianship. And she is currently the head of the Warren D. Allen Music Library at Florida State University, but I knew her from way back when she was the director of music and media library at UMKC in Kansas City. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. I'm so delighted to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. You're our first librarian, and it's such a cool job that you do.
Yes, most days it is.
So I was curious, what led you to become a music librarian and musicologist?
That's a great question. My path has always been within music, but has had a few zigzags within music. And I think a lot of us who have music careers can relate to that. My undergraduate degree is in piano performance, and I actually started out as a church music major in voice, and then switched to piano and composition, and then wound up in piano performance. And at the end of that degree, I decided to try musicology for graduate school. While I was a decent pianist at the time, I wasn't good enough to be a concert pianist, and I wasn't sure I wanted to teach piano lessons, and that was sort of as far as I could see then. I went on and got a musicology degree, and at the end of that degree, trying to figure out what next to do with my life, I had been accepted to some PhD programs in musicology. Again, at that point, I was getting a little nervous about the ratio of funding versus jobs. I think people can still relate to that now, right? The head of the music library at the University of Virginia suggested I consider music librarianship. And I asked her why. And she said, well, what do you want to do with a PhD in musicology? And I replied that I wanted to work in academe. I wanted to be around music materials. I wanted to teach, work with students, write. I really love that environment. And she said that I could do all of those things as a music librarian. And the next piece of advice I got from another music librarian there was so smart. She suggested that I try to get a full-time staff position in the libraries. It didn't have to be in the music library, but a full-time job. And I was able to do that when I finished the master's degree, and I worked full-time. I did wind up working in the music library on a grant. But what I thought was really good about that experience, not unlike other degree programs that have you have an internship or other practical experience, because I was working full-time, I got to be paid for the experience of working in a library full-time to see if I really like that environment, if I like that kind of work, before I invested in another degree. So at the end of 2 years, then I went to Indiana. And the rest is herstory, as it were, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but that was my path. So from performance to musicology to music librarianship, and I use all of those skills and tools every day. So it's worked for me. And I think that's often what it comes down to, making your experiences work for you in your career and your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, you definitely have one of the most interesting music jobs, in my opinion.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. The short version of what I do is that I tell people is I answer the questions, I spend the money, and I supervise the people. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that gets at the heart of it.
What do you think is one of the most challenging things about your field?
Change is a constant. And if one does not deal well with change, librarianship, and in particular musical librarianship, is probably not for you. So change is everything from how people use or consume, I hate to use that word, but I think it's apt now, music, how people look for things in general, whether it's music or supporting areas, and how they filter out and make choices. And as a librarian, I have to stay about 3 steps ahead at least in all of those, because we're always trying to purchase or license materials for folks to use. And so are we spending money on the right things? Are our users able to use them correctly? And boy, I ask myself that about 10 times a day, especially as our vendors, the big publishers, keep changing how they package and present their information. Is it in a way that our users are going to spend the time to sift through? Those are some challenges. Some of the other challenges have to do with who owns or who has permission to use something. So an artist puts out their own work, say on Spotify or Apple Music. And I totally get that. Just like many composers retain control over their scores and they publish their scores themselves. You pay them via PayPal and they send you a PDF. Totally get that, because then they're in control of what it looks like, who has access to it. They don't have any cut of it going to an agent or a publisher or anybody like that. But in library land, how does that work for longevity and sustainability and making sure people have access to those materials 20 years from now, 50 years from now? We're all trying various approaches to get at that. So that's one of the challenges that's going on right now, one of the many. So thinking about how to get information that people want to use and how to make sure it's presented in a way people have access to, not only now, but will they have access 20 years from now, or 50, even 5? I mean, do you still have the music you had on your phone or whatever device from 5 years ago?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Those are just a couple of the things that are challenges, big picture challenges that I think about a lot and work on in my own sort of corner of the universe.
Do you find that there are more books and materials that are going out of print as publishing houses merge?
Are harder to get, yes. I would think of it as a gap. Okay, so things that are in public domain that have been digitized, they're available through resources such as the Internet Archive, IMSLP, and a number of our commercial vendors pick them up because they're relatively cheap to do so compared to their current catalog. But there's a gap of things after that that maybe aren't used that much, that aren't yet public domain, and are not being continually published because there's not as much use for it. So yes, that is a concern. And then there are also questions about, well, should that repertoire still be in the repertoire if it's not played as much? That's a great question. And part of that depends on the faculty member, right? And what their rep is, how much they depend on what their teachers used and how many new things they're bringing in. It's an interesting question. Thinking about the longevity and thinking about what we should keep available. And that answer depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
Because we can't keep it all. We don't have infinite storage, either physically or digitally. Good question.
Yeah. And there's so much great music, so many great books,
Mm-hmm. And there's great stuff coming out every day. And so we can't neglect that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're behind in how we can provide access to that uniformly, because so many things are coming out electronic only. Born digital is the term.
What do you think is one of the most rewarding things about what you do?
Oh, gosh. When there are two big ones. One is when someone finds exactly what they need, and it just makes my day when they are so thrilled they found just what they needed. But even more is that moment when they realize, oh, I can find this by myself. I have the tools to be able to do this. Because, it's easy to seem like I have all the answers, that I can find everything. It's not true, but people think that. But it's that adage: teach a person to fish. They can feed themselves. Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach him to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. That sort of thing. So, yeah, I love that moment when the pieces come together, whether it's finding or being able to put pieces of research together to come up with something new, a new perspective. Again, that discovery piece.
What is a book that you recently read that challenged you, a book that inspired you, and a book that you couldn't put down?
Well, a book that I'm reading right now that I can't put down is R.F. Kuang's, Kuang is the author's last name, Babel, An Arcane History. It's fiction, but part of what I find interesting about it is that it has to do with language, but it also has to do with colonialization and a different sort of twist on looking at what is a commodity, shall we say, and I'll just leave it at that. So that's fun. So yes, it makes me think. I haven't been able to put it down. I'm a voracious reader, so that's good and bad. So I read a book by Gwen Strauss called The Nine, and it's the true story of a band of women who survived the worst of Nazi Germany. And I found that inspiring and fascinating about how these women, as it says, survived the worst of Nazi Germany. I think it's really important that we read these accounts because that generation is dying of people who survived, and I think it's important for us to read about their lives and what they went through, and hopefully learn so that humankind won't do that again. Yeah.
Those are some really great book recommendations. I always love sort of writing them down and checking them out later on. So, speaking of libraries, what is one favorite library that you've visited and one that you want to visit?
Oh, I love the Library of Congress and its various branches. And I will also say I love the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. Both of those are just fabulous. I would love to spend more time in each of those facilities and collections. So, and I say that in two different ways, just because, well, one thing to me that's always fun about the New York Public Library, and of course this happens after you get to a certain point in your career, is that every time I've been there, I've run into people I knew, not just the people who work there, who I know professionally through the Music Library Association and other things, but scholars and other librarians and other folks. And that's always fun and exciting to be in a great place like that and run into people you know. And Library of Congress, again, beautiful. The Jefferson building, the main one is beautiful, and just all the wonderful treasures that they have there. I've always wanted to go to the British Library. Again, incredible collections, and also the Bibliothèque Nationale in France. Again, two big national libraries. And part of that is not only the breadth and depth of their collections, but some of the innovative things they're doing with their music collections, their music manuscripts in both sites. So
Excellent.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
I'm just curious, do you actually like the smell of books?
There is a certain age I do like. So things that are printed between, say, the 1600s to the early 19th century, I love the smell, as long as it's not wet. So basically, things that were printed before the Industrial Revolution really happened and the amount of cotton rag decreased in paper. I do not like the smell of European publishing during or right after World War II. And of course, that's sort of for obvious reasons, because the paper quality is so bad because of the lack of resources. And that actually becomes an interesting field unto itself, telling the history of a country through its paper, through what they use to print books and scores on.
I wonder if anyone's written a book about that.
Oh, they probably have.
I'm sure
they probably have. Yeah, I'm sure they have. I mean, there's all these studies about the history of the book, so I'm sure they have. But for me, it's fun, as someone who works with a large collection that has items from all over and various years, is being able to really We could spot something from 1949 Germany pretty quickly, again, because of the paper. And you could say the same for the Soviet era as well, 50s, 60s, early 70s.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Again, the history of a people told through their paper. So, yeah. So, yes, I do like the smell, but of a certain age of book and scores, and no wet paper. I do not like the smell of, well, if it's paper being made, that's one thing if it's wet, but the smell of wet books is kind of depressing because it means there's some damage.
True, true. What is a piece of either music, research, or life advice that you ignore and one that you always follow?
Well, probably be ladylike is one I would ignore. And of course, I grew up at a different time. So the whole notion of what is a lady and ladylike, certainly I've heard too many other terms for assertive in my life, shall we say. Yes. And what advice would I always take? I guess the older I get, I would say, or maybe the busier I get, it's probably two things. One is to try to get enough sleep, and the other is write as much down as you can. So you don't forget or miss something, document it, which is not a bad idea. They're not terribly thrilling pieces of advice, but they certainly things that I'm reminded of. If things don't go well, did I get enough sleep, and did I forget to write down something for myself?
Yes, yes. Still very, very important golden nuggets.
Well, practical, and
Yes.
I'm practical.
What is something that you wish young musicians would do more of?
Take the time to explore within reason, and it's really difficult, but let me give you an example. We spend a lot of money every year on the Berlin Philharmonic Digital Concert Hall and on, say, the Met Opera on demand. And I would really hope our students take the time to explore those resources and listen, or just peruse the scores we have upstairs, to just sit down and pull 30 off of a shelf and just look through them to think about not only whether they could play them or not, but who wrote them, what was the context, would they, if they put it on a program, how would they program it? Especially when you're in a place that has a rich music library, explore. And also, if you're in a place, again, we have over 500 concerts a year, go listen. My gosh, most of it's free. Just take the time to go sit and listen. Listen to things that you don't think you'd like because you don't know until you listen, and as well as go and support your friends who are performing as well. So explore in that sense. And that's just a little part of the universe. But for young musicians, yes, listen. And you've got a great amount of music available for free. Even though YouTube doesn't always have the top best quality recordings, you can listen to 5 different versions of, say, one Haydn sonata that you wouldn't necessarily be able to otherwise. And take a few moments to write down what you're listening to and what you observe, to really be in that moment and explore what you think about it. It's a long answer, but
I love that, though. I've got to say that's one thing I miss about not being in school anymore is the library and all that wonderful access to amazing stuff.
Yeah. And for me, it's exciting to be able to make so much available to our population and encourage folks to use it.
This is a little off topic, but what are your thoughts on authentic tuning and period instruments?
Oh, that was a great question when I saw it on the list. So what you don't know is that I actually played harpsichord for quite a while when I was in Charlottesville and at UVA, and I played recorder some. So I have dabbled in the early music realm. On one hand, it can be an academic exercise. I think it's fun to try. I think and again, it's easy for me to say fun because I'm not graded on that anymore, but it's fun to try to listen, perform, and examine music through that lens of what assumptions we can make about what people knew or thought at that time. I enjoy an early music concert. I enjoyed playing harpsichord very much. Yeah, the authentic tuning kind of makes my 21st century ear go, but it's, to me, it's fun. Again, it's worth exploring. It's curious. So I'm sorry I don't have a more rabble-rousing answer than that about striving for authenticity. Because how can we say anything is authentic, right? I mean, we're not using the exact same tools they were using then. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a very interesting, as you say, experiment. And I love when people try to do, have their pianos or harpsichords or other things tuned to, what they thought of back then. Because it really is such an interesting sound to hear pieces we've all been familiar with played as similarly as possible to when they were written.
And it does make your ear that's used to A440 tuning go. And if you sing with those kinds of ensembles, and I did for a while, I don't have perfect pitch. I have okay relative pitch. So trying to sing a piece in one versus the other, my voice is saying this isn't quite. Yeah, I'm used to singing it like this, and yeah. That's part of, to me, that's part of what makes it kind of wonky for me is my own instrument, retuning my own instrument and ear. But again, it's fun, and I love the idea. I love that folks are looking at that, are trying that performance. I also play old time music and have played bluegrass, and so there are folks who get all hung up into the well, so and so would have played it like this. Well, maybe that you have to be true to that tradition. I don't know. Is it good music? Are people enjoying it? Are you getting something out of it? I think some of those are the questions we should ask, unless we are saying from the outset we are going to strive for an authentic performance, and this is how we're framing it and how we're trying to do it. You don't pull that out at a jam, though.
Yeah.
Or right, different settings, but some of the similar mindsets. So good question. Keep them coming.
Well, you happen to play a lot of instruments, but if there's any one instrument that you've always wanted to try and haven't yet, what would that be?
And haven't yet. So, okay, so you put that qualifier in, because I've got an open back banjo that I really want to work on, clawhammer style banjo. So I haven't really done that yet. I really want to work on the fiddle. Not the violin, but the fiddle. So the violin, the bad joke is which one you're willing. What's the difference? It's the one you're more willing to get beer spilled on. But when I say fiddle, I'm thinking about old time music, bluegrass, maybe some Irish, not necessarily, Bach or that sort of thing. We'll see. Hopefully I'll live long enough and have enough energy to try it out and not drive anybody else in the neighborhood crazy with my scratching.
Well, fiddle is such a unique art, and they don't always use chin rests, and they have different flatter bridges, and which makes sense because you got to go back and forth all the time.
Yes, and the bow. I mean, how the bowing technique is totally different often. And in fact, you talk about. Some do use chin rests, some don't. My uncle, who played fiddle, actually would rest it on his chest. So he would play it sort of mid-chest, and I don't know why he did that, and of course he is long gone, so I can't ask him. But it's always interesting how people learn and how people play things. So
that's neat. You'll have to keep me posted on your fiddle adventures and your banjo adventures.
Well, thank you. So much fun.
What are your favorite and least favorite parts of the creative process?
That's a good question. One of my favorite parts is sort of the messy phase, when you've got all these ideas sparking and you're trying to get them down or get them out there and see what works. And of course, there's some failure in that too, but to me, that's not really failure. It's testing something and seeing if it works or not. And notice I say works, not if you like it or not, because sometimes like is subjective, and depending on what you're doing, like may or may not work as a descriptor. Deadlines are always a struggle, that as far as what I don't like. Because, and this is a saying that has come back to me a number of times as I work on a number of things, is don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And sometimes you just have to put it together and put it out there and say, good enough. And that's tough. That's tough. I find that as tough as the rest of the process. So, good question. Again, practical answers. That's me.
That's all good. Did you have any barriers to reaching where you are in your career?
Well, I think part of the good thing about being stubborn is that maybe you're too stubborn to see something as a barrier. I think I was first generation college student, so neither one of my parents went to college, and my guidance counselors in high school didn't know what to do with someone who really wanted to be a music major. So in some ways those were barriers, but at the same time, my parents didn't push me to go to college, but they didn't say you aren't going to go to college. They said we will do what we can, and I accepted it at that. Other barriers, I mean, I'm just stubborn.
That's okay though.
I'm just stubborn, you know? And people back home didn't quite understand what I was going to do or said I was going to do. I didn't let that bother me. It wasn't their path, so that's okay.
You could replace stubborn with resilient because, you had a dream and you went for it.
I did. And while that dream changed, it was all within music. And I think that's the other part of it, is touching base with that dream to say, maybe I need to revise it a little bit. What really fits well with what I can do and what I can afford to do, or what I can make it all work, which is a challenge.
So another book question is, if you could be any fictional character, who would you be?
Gosh, that's a really great question. Okay, this will tell you a lot about what I like to read. Claire Fraser from the Outlander series.
Nice.
Right? She's resilient. She's smart. She's savvy. She follows her heart, but she also follows her head. So, of course, I love the Outlander series.
It is a good one. You gotta have a lot of time though to get through those books.
Yes. I have had some road trips where I really enjoyed having those recording. So it makes a difference.
Oh yeah, audiobook. I always forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a good one.
If you have a long road trip, it makes those miles fly by.
I bet. If your life was a novel, what would the title be?
Maybe Resilient. Yeah, Resilient, not maybe. Resilient. Instead of Curious George, Curious Laura, meaning I'm by nature I'm curious. Hopefully not that I am a curious object, but because I think actually being curious by nature is important to being a librarian, important to being a scholar, important to being a musician. Always asking why. Have you thought about this? What if we tried it this way?
Very true. What is a common stereotype about music, performing arts, or even music librarianship that you hope to break with your work?
Wow. Because there are so many stereotypes in each of those areas. Let's see. I do wear a cardigan, but only when I'm cold. While I have glasses, I don't have my hair in a bun, and I don't go around saying shh. So those are actually librarian stereotypes. And I encourage people to use the library to have discussions. In fact, I was able to, our dean procured some money for us to redo our furniture. And one of the things that I was able to get are tables that are guitar pick shaped, so people can sit together and work together on something and have a discussion instead of these long tables that really didn't foster any kind of collaboration. I will also say the same guitar pick shaped tables are great if you have a bunch of books and scores and you just want to take over the whole table. So you have basically 4-foot triangles and 6-foot triangles. So nice. Yes, trying to not have people feel like libraries have to be solitary spaces. We have some social spaces and we have some quiet spaces. And I think that's important. People need all of those. The other big stereotype is that we are not approachable. Please ask questions. That's how you learn. Just like mispronouncing a name is how you learn how to say it correctly. You first encountered it in print. How would you know necessarily how something was pronounced otherwise?
Very true. Although I must say, I'm a fan of the cardigan.
Yes, they do come in handy, especially when the temperatures get a little cool in the library, which is pretty often.
And they're so chic.
Oh, yeah, they can be. Yes.
What is something you wish you'd known when you first started?
Well, one of the things that I never thought would be as useful as it was that I took, 1 or 2 semesters of accounting in undergrad, then learning how to use what was then Lotus 123, but was a spreadsheet program while I was a student worker at Indiana University's library, music library. Those were both very important skills. So basic accounting skills and being able to use a spreadsheet. Those are 2 things that really came in handy, and I never could have anticipated it. That plus Mom, God bless her, in high school, she said, you need to take typing. This is way before computers. And that was very smart. Yes, I'm telling my age, but so those are some skills that really have come in handy because I manage budgets and I manage spreadsheets. So I use spreadsheet programs and various budgeting systems multiple times a week, sometimes even multiple times a day. Not music related at all, right? But there you go.
I know. It seems like nobody can escape a spreadsheet.
This is true. Yes, I would say so.
They're always lurking around the corner. Do you feel that your creative life has turned out like you imagined?
That's a good question. I would say my creative life has certainly shifted in some ways. For a while, I was married to someone who really didn't appreciate having a musical spouse, so I did not play music at home as much as I would have liked. I don't have that spouse anymore, so so that part of my life has changed. You know, that I'm playing music a lot more than I did during that marriage. But when I was married, I learned how to knit, and so I wound up picking up another type of creative skill. So to me, whether it's visual or performing art, I need that kind of creativity in my life. The idea of making something, of creating something, is at my core. And in retrospect, I can see how I was moving from one to the other as a way of keeping that close to me.
We're going to get to a quirky question. And
go for it.
Okay. If you were stranded on a desert island and you could only have one music album, one book, one beverage, and one food. This is probably the toughest question, right?
Okay, yes. Okay, the beverage is easy. It would be coffee, good coffee. And the other thing is, in order to make coffee, you would also have water. So I feel like I'm getting by 2 for 1 on that. Food, gosh. Oh, that's a tough one. Macaroni and cheese has always been my favorite since a child. Probably not the best nutritional choice every day. Let's see, 1 music album and 1 book. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh. The music album, that's really tough. Because the other thing is, it's something I would have to be able not only to love, but be able to tolerate listening to every day. Because while it sounds fun at first, you have to think, can I listen to it every day? Well, if I set a box set of Brahms symphonies, that way I can listen to a different one every day, maybe.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thinking outside the box.
Right. Book, again, I would have to have a box set of either perhaps the complete Outlander. So that would keep me going. And part of that is that story has so many different characters, so many different things going on. There you go. I'm thinking outside the box with my box sets.
That's right. Thinking outside the box set. If you could bring back any creative person from the grave, who would it be?
This may sound weird, but I would think Frida Kahlo, because she created amidst a lot of pain and heartache. And I would just like to know, just sort of observe her process and how she moved around her life and all sorts of things.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. One final question. In your own words, what does living a creative life mean to you?
Living a creative life means seeing possibility in everything or just about everything, and then making choices about where to focus your energy and express yourself and express your view of the world. And I realize that's very broad, but I think one of the struggles I have is I see possibility in so many different things, and then you really do have to make careful choices because one has only so much time and so much energy. And to think about, you can try different things, but you have to figure out what is going to work best, where you can express yourself the best, or how you can collaborate with others to bring something alive and bring something new. It's really a great question. And if you ask me again tomorrow, I might answer a little bit differently. I think it's also being open to possibility, that many possibilities do exist, but you have to be open to them. It's a good question.
Anything else you would like to leave with our listeners before we go?
Wow, look for the beauty in everything, in anything, as much as you can. I mean, humanity has been through a difficult time with the pandemic and still coping with so many different things. And I think we can look for the beauty in each other and try to bring something positive to this life, to being and to other people. And that's one of the wonderful things about music, is that music can be part of a community. That's one of the venues that I really enjoy performing in, is the local jams where people make music together and form a community. So it doesn't have to be the soloist on the stage. Music therapy is another great example of music being a way for people to develop emotionally, to cope with whatever's going on in their lives, or a way for them to deal with whatever physical issues are going on. Some of the things I've read about and seen videos of that music therapy has done are incredible. That sense of expression and sense of something that people can relate to is life-changing.
Yeah.
There you go. Peace, love, joy.
That's right.
Be kind to each other.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining the podcast. And listeners, please check out the show notes for her full biography and links to the library. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.